Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. They walk unseen and foul in lonely places where the words have been spoken and the rites howled through at their seasons. Do you read Sutter Kane?
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapons! Now! Charge the lightning field.
Let's start.
Welcome back to Dispatch Ajax, the podcast that informs you about all things geek culture or just weird stuff you don't understand or want to know more about.
Any of those.
Anything you choose. Today, our topic is mysterious books, tomes, and grimoires.
Grimoires?
Grim noirs, yeah. A lot of Steve Niles stories coming in. A lot of Stephen King.
Yeah, definitely a lot of Frank Miller.
A lot of Frank Miller, yep. Grim and gritty, yep. So we are talking about mysterious books of magic, horror, and the occult, both fictional and for real.
For real?
Especially since Evil Dead Rises just recently came out. Maybe that'll help.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, have some.
Yeah. What was that, Mr. Tobin?
Evo Shandor. Mr. Shandor is my father. Evo, please.
It's Vigo! Vigo, the scourge of Carpathia, the sorrow of Moldavia. Death is but a doorway, time is but a window. I'll be back.
Which is funny, because that actor also is in another one we're going to talk about at some point. Blows his head off with a shotgun.
I love on Google, is Vigo the Carpathian a real painting? Wilhelm von Homburg.
That's right.
He passed away in 2004.
Yeah, okay. Yep. It wasn't recent.
You might know him from Midnight Cabaret.
Of course. That's on...
Everybody knows Midnight Cabaret.
It's on repeat in my house.
Anyway, see, this is how we get off topic.
Girl, you know it's true. So we're going to be talking about mysterious books, occult tomes, and terrifying grimoires, and what those are and what they mean, both in fiction and non-fiction. For those of you who don't know, a grimoire is a book of magic that informs the reader of occult practices. And there are a lot of grimoires, but very few what we would consider authentic. So I think the most famous one that people could say right off the top of their head is probably, and say it with me, the Necronomicon.
The Necronomicon.
That's right. That is right.
That's right, kids.
Hey, kids, let's read from the Necronomicon.
What's in today's Book of the Dead?
Oh, it'd be like Most of the Clown. No, it's Pennywise. He's opening the book. He's got the kids.
What does our friend Abdul Al-Hazred have for us today?
Or it's George W. Bush on 9/11. Like, he's reading the Necronomicon to the kids.
Just staring off in the middle distance.
Oh, no. Pennywise comes and whispers in his ear. There are multiple things known as the Necronomicon. The most famous being the book that is cited often by H.P. Lovecraft in, I want to say, 18 stories? Yeah, 18 stories of Lovecraft's work claim that it's a book about the Ancient Ones, how to summon them, what they're all about, their favorite colors, what they do on the weekend.
Whether they like long walks from the beach.
Their perfect Sundays.
Whether they're cat people or dog people.
It is also a real book, and not to be confused with the Necronomicon Ex Mortis from the Evil Dead, which, if you really think about it, it just means the Book of the Dead out of the dead.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, but it's hat on a hat.
They're just being very descriptive, that's all.
Honestly, I think they said that because they wanted to differentiate themselves from Lovecraft's Necronomicon.
Why not?
Which is really interesting. And this is probably the best one to focus on because other authors in their fictional works that reference specifically the Necronomicon that Lovecraft talks about, even though that's not a real book. Also, the Book of the Dead are real books. So we're going to jump into which is which and what's real, what's not. Give you some sort of background so you can understand when people cite this, what the fuck they're talking about.
What the fuck they're talking about?
What the fuck, man? I got nothing. I don't know. Now, the Necronomicon, or the Book of the Dead, which was originally referred to as the Kitab al-Azif, the fictional grimoire, in stories by H.P. Lovecraft. It was first brought up in Lovecraft's 1924 short story, The Hound. It was written in 1922, though the author of the Necronomicon was, quote, the Mad Arab. Oof.
Abdul al-Hazred.
Which he had also referred to in an earlier work called The Nameless City. Among other apocrypha, this book is supposed to contain an account of the old ones, or the ancient ones, their history, and how to summon them to our realm, which gets really, really convoluted. Other authors, such as August Derleth and Clark Ashton Smith, have also cited the Necronomicon in their works, and Lovecraft gave a thumbs up, referring to it as a background of evil verisimilitude. Should be a bumper sticker.
Yeah, both those authors picked up the reins of Lovecraftian universe and ran with it for good and ill.
Yeah, it's cool horror fiction, but I don't know if I want to continue on with the, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, racist stuff that it was representing. But one of the fun things is that a lot of the readers that read it during its original publication thought it was a real book and bombarded both booksellers and librarians to stock it. Kind of like in Rick and Morty when he starts talking about the Szechuan sauce at McDonald's from Mulan, and everybody went to McDonald's demanding it, even though they never brought it back. In fact, people have faked Necronomicon instances, including one in the rare book catalogs of the Yale University Library. Someone actually managed to sneak in a card for it in the Dewey Decimal System.
Nice.
In 1924, Lovecraft did write a pseudo-history of the Necronomicon. It was published in 1938, around the time of World War II.
After his death.
Yeah, after his death. And originally the book was called Al-Azif, an Arabic word that Lovecraft defined as, quote,
the nocturnal sound made by insects, supposed to be the howling of demons.
That's a lot for just 2 syllables.
Well, English is kind of the shittiest language, so...
It really is. This was all derived from the biblical legend of the Lord of the Flies, or the Lies, depending on which, interpretation you're reading, and Psalm 91:5, in which some 19th century English Bibles describe as bugs by night, where later translations interpret it as terror by night. Now, there's a big gap there.
Wow, what do you mean? It's one and the same, right?
I mean, bugs or terror. One Arabic English dictionary translates azif as, quote, whistling of the wind, weird sound, or noise. And a man named Gabriel Osani defined it as an eerie sound of the jinn in the wilderness. The tradition of Azif al-Jinn is linked to the phenomenon of the singing sand. That's a whole other topic. We won't get into that today. But
singing in the sand.
So Lovecraft used this as sort of the backbone of his entire catalog of stories. Even ones that don't seem related, all are sort of tied together by the thread of the Necronomicon.
Which I think is what lends credence to people thinking, oh, this might be a real thing, a real book out there.
Right. Which it kind of is, just not the one that he talks about. According to Lovecraft, it was a reference to the nocturnal sound of insects, of course, but that represented the howling of demons. Yeah. According to Lovecraft, it was written in Damascus in 738 AD. He was set upon an invisible monster who devoured him publicly in broad daylight. Woof.
Sometimes it's just the way it goes.
Al-Azif was then translated into Greek by Theodorus Philatius of Constantinople.
I wouldn't mind meeting them.
Theodorus Philatio, who gave it the name Necronomicon. And then a man named Aulus Wormius. Wormius? Really? Wormius? Made a Latin translation in 1228.
He's related to Grima Wormtongue, I think.
Geekus Wormius. That's the... In 1232, right after Wormius' translation, Pope Gregory IX banned both the Greek and Latin versions of the volume.
Good call, Greg.
Sup, Greg? Good job, bro.
Hey, it's Pope Greg now.
I'm a grown man. So everybody needs to just calm the fuck down and realize that it's fictional.
Nuh-uh.
It's not a real book. That specific book is not real, even though people tried to, all throughout the 20th century, tried to pass it off as a real book. In fact, one of the greatest trivia moments about that is that the Vatican constantly receives requests for this book because they believe the Vatican Library has a copy, though it's not fucking real. In 1973, Owlswick Press issued an edition of the Necronomicon written in a fictional language known as Duriak. It only printed 348 copies.
Isn't Duriak the uncle of Worf?
No.
It was a joke.
No?
It sounds like a Klingon name.
I thought it sounded like one of the Three Musketeers.
Let's cut that whole bit.
Whatever. This got even more muddy in the late 1970s when a book that claimed to be a translation of the actual Necronomicon was published. This book by
someone called Simon,
mm-hmm.
and apparently had little connection to the fictional Lovecraft mythos, but instead was based on Sumerian mythology.
Right, sort of in Ghostbusters territory yet again. And this, of course, was later renamed the Simon Necronomicon. And it went into trade paperback in 1980 and has never been out of print. It sold 800,000 copies by 2006, making it the most popular Necronomicon of all from 1996. Oh, I like this. 3 additional volumes have been published. The Necronomicon Spellbook, which is, of course, a book of path workings to the 50 names of Marduk, the sun god.
Slayer of Tiamat.
Dead Names, the dark history of the Necronomicon, and a history of the book itself of the late 70s New York occult scene, The Gates of the Necronomicon, which makes me think of The Ninth Gate, starring Johnny Depp.
Oh, yeah.
By Roman Polanski, which is about an occult book. And there were hoax versions. A lot of people put out books called the Necronomicon. They weren't real. None of them were real. Because it's not a real book. Unless you talk about the Book of the Dead, of which there are many, including an ancient Egyptian book, which is a funerary text.
Just Metallica's Reload.
Jesus. Hope not. I hope not.
He had nothing to do with that. Yeah, so you have the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which was funerary rites and incantations. And there's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is actually the most popular book on Tibetan Buddhism in the Western world, with at least 21 translations in multiple languages and formats. It's kind of a sample of Tibetan literary prose and a compelling commentary on the universal experience of death and dying from a Buddhist perspective. It contains vivid descriptions of the bardos, or intermediary states between death and rebirth, that are, like other medieval texts, often illustrated. The most important thing to understand about the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it is meant to be read aloud. It is meant to be read to the dead.
Interesting.
So it kind of explains the spiritual journey of life and death, but as you read about that to the dead.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Call of the Wild or Jack London stuff that they put in Egyptian tombs, because they would actually bury them with the book as a funerary tradition, because they believed that they'd be able to read it and talk about it later, because to them the afterlife was just, I don't know, like a meet and greet. You die, and then you go and hang out with people that you may not have met before, and drink some punch.
Something like that.
So it's in that vein.
The Buddhist idea of transitional state of being, where you're neither here nor there. You're not of life or death or of the next, but in between all of it.
Now, on the Egyptian side, there is a book called The Book of the Dead, which is completely real, but it's a more accurate translation of it would be the book of coming forth by day or the book of emerging forth into the light. But man, Book of the Dead sounded so fucking cool. And really, the Egyptian one's not a book. It's more like it's like a collection of Stephen King novellas, essentially.
It's like the Canterbury Tales of the Egyptian dead.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, that's pretty close. Or the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
What? Put a bookmark in that.
Yeah, drop a pin there. Basically, it's a number of magic spells intended to assist a dead person's journey into the underworld and into the afterlife, written by priests over a period of about 1,000 years. It was buried with the dead in their burial chamber, for those who were, worthy of having a burial chamber. And it followed other traditional writings like the pyramid texts and the coffin texts, which were also buried with people that, But the difference was that those texts were painted onto objects instead of written on papyrus. The Book of the Dead was actually written down on papyrus. And so there is no official Book of the Dead. It's just kind of a loose collection of thoughts and ideas that were left for the dead on their way to Valhalla. It's not Valhalla.
Very much not so, but
it's so not.
Let's just roll along.
That's the real Book of the Dead. Now, some of you may recognize this book, bound in skin with a horrid face, in the movie franchise The Evil Dead. Now, the difference is that this book is called the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, which in Latin would mean the Book of the Dead out of the dead, but whatever. It's also known, though, in that series as the Naturium di Monto, which is, of course, big agricultural company that sells pesticides.
Oh, man, I got cancer from Demonto again.
Well, good luck suing them. This, of course, is an ancient tome of prophecies, incantations, and demon summoning, compiled by a race of beings known as the Dark Ones. I wonder how much they overlap with the Old Ones.
I mean, it's a little bit of that, a little bit of this.
The idea was that the book wasn't supposed to be in human hands, but it eventually was. Just watch Evil Dead 2 if you really wanted to skip over a lot of the fat involved. And of course, that book in Evil Dead was designed by special effects artist Tom Sullivan.
It's very cool.
Remember, the Necronomicon Ex Mortis and the Necronomicon by H.P. Lovecraft are different things. And they are both based on real things that have nothing to do with them.
So the Necronomicon has flittered about, especially in lots of movies, after The Evil Dead. You have plenty of Lovecraft-based horror films, like the Dunwich Horror from 1970, where it shows up, stuff like that. But there are also some wild places where it shows up, like Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday.
Really?
Yeah. The Necronomicon and the Kandarian Dagger appear within the movie, very briefly.
Interesting.
The Simpsons have references to the Necronomicon.
Oh, is it that early Treehouse of Horror where they raise the dead?
In the Brawl in the Family episode.
Oh, no. Oh, well.
And in the Cthulhu Gesundheit comic. Those pop up. You also have stuff like the Book of Ebon, which is first mentioned by one of H.P. Lovecraft's contemporaries, Clark Ashton Smith, that we spoke of before.
Mm-hmm.
That actually is kind of a version of the Necronomicon that pops up in my favorite Fulci film, The Beyond, from 1981.
Ooh.
A great one.
That's good.
You have something like Invocations from Hereditary, where it all talks about Paimon, and we don't necessarily need to spoil that for anybody who hasn't seen it.
Right.
Of course, you have the Scroll of Thoth, or the Book of the Dead, from the 1932 and 1989 Mummy films.
Wow. That's an interesting segue, because the Book of Thoth is in and of itself a whole shebang. It appears in an ancient Egyptian short story from the Ptolemaic period known as Setni, Quamus, and Neneferkapta.
Got it in one.
Nailed it. Or Setni 1, as it's commonly referred. And supposedly it contains 2 spells written by Thoth himself, one of which allows the reader to understand the speech of animals, sort of a Dr. Dolittle vibe, and one which allows the reader to perceive the god themselves. So, like, full consciousness of the gods, kind of like in a lot of Greek myth. And then one that shows the formula for flubber, and then one that shows you how to make transparent aluminum.
Or as the British and Australians would say, aluminium.
According to this, the book was originally hidden at the bottom of the Nile under Koptos, where it was locked inside a series of boxes guarded by snakes.
Snakes! Oh, why did it have to be snakes?
So many snakes. The Egyptian prince, Neferkapta, fought the serpents and got the book, but since he stole it, Thoth killed his wife and son.
Take that.
He then committed suicide and then was entombed with the book. It's kind of Hercules-ish in that sense, because he killed his wife and kid, whatever.
Oh, I thought you meant it's very much like Kevin Sorbo. Is that...
Oh, well, you're giving too much credit to Kevin Sorbo, let's be honest.
Don't we all?
No, not at all. He's an asshole.
Yep.
Generations later, the story's main character, Setne Kawamas, who's based on an actual historical prince named Kemawaset, steals the book from the tomb, even though there's an argument with Neferkapta's ghost.
Hey.
Ghost fight.
Don't do that. I'm a ghost. Listen up.
On the bright side, Setne then meets a beautiful woman who seduces him into killing his children and humiliating himself in front of the pharaoh. It's the oldest story.
Damn.
God, it is the oldest story. And then he finds out that this entire epic was created. It's a mirage. It's an illusion created by Neferkapta. And hoping to avoid further retribution, Setne returns the book to Neferkapta's tomb.
Good call.
I'm getting kind of Christmas Carol vibes a little bit. At Neferkapta's request, Setne also finds the bodies of his wife and son, and then buries them solemnly with his body. And then the tomb is sealed. Now, the entire premise of that story is that, and this is a very common trope in mythology, Prometheus, it's the tree of knowledge. It's the belief that the gods' knowledge is not meant for humans to possess. And you're always punished for tapping into the knowledge of the gods. And this will be a theme. A lot of these things are parallel. Of course, it's mentioned in a lot of Lovecraft stuff, most notably Through the Gates of the Silver Key, not one of my favorite Smashing Pumpkins songs, but where he tries to tie it into, like we said before, Yog Sothoth.
Yog Sothoth.
Sothoth. Go look up that if you want to know what that's about. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff here that doesn't really matter at all.
Somebody had to do it.
That's true. It's important to remember that there is also another book called The Book of Thoth, written by the greatest asshole in the world, Aleister Crowley, who was an author, occultist, sexual predator, rapist, drug addict, Renaissance man, pool shark.
Work with British intelligence?
Did he?
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well, Houdini worked with American intelligence. So, interesting.
So did Shaquille O'Neal. You can't prove that he didn't.
I can. Well, you can't prove a negative. You're right. The Book of Thoth, a short essay on the tarot of the Egyptians, is the title of The Equinox, published on March 21st, 1944, in an edition limited to 200 numbered and signed copies. So he's already marketing.
Smart.
Girl bossing all over this thing. He describes the philosophy and use of his version of Thoth Tarot, which is basically just a customized tarot deck. Essentially, he's just branding here. The original was bound in Moroccan leather and printed on pre-wartime paper, which made it valuable, obviously. He sold a lot. If you used the British pound, it sold 1,500 pounds worth, which in 2013, where I took this from, it would be equal to 57,540 pounds.
That's in less than 3 months.
That's insanity. But it's important to remember that Aleister Crowley is an asshole. He was nicknamed
the wickedest man in the world. That's what it was.
Yeah, wickedest man in the world.
I love that his Wikipedia says British mystic, occultist, writer, poet, and mountain climber.
Hey, man, in all of us multitudes, you know? He looks like You know what I'm talking about.
David Kemper.
Yes, David Kemper. That's the one, idiot.
Are you saying he didn't do that? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I don't think David Kemper founded Thelema. No, I don't think so.
Was it the Fu Schnickens? Was that who it was?
He founded the cult of Shaq Fu.
I still pray to Shaq Fu every night.
You know, they redid that.
I did not know that.
They did. It's on
Why?
like Xbox somewhere. I don't know. It's pretty great. Of course, he belongs to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Why can't I not remember his name? Fuck, what's wrong with me? You know what? It doesn't matter.
No, too far in. L. Ron Hubbard.
There you go. LRH, yes. He looks a lot like LRH. And actually, they have a lot of similarities. There are a lot of parallels there. Created his own religion, was a magician, novelist, and mountaineer. LRH was a sailor. In fact, that's how they operated for a lot of the early Scientology, was being on a boat so that they couldn't be reined in by, any nation's laws.
Maybe that's where David Miscavige's wife is.
Oh, she's at the briny deep for sure. She's in Davy Jones's locker, 100%. Swimming with the fishes. Oof. Moving on. Is that all we have on the Necronomicon?
Mostly, I think spinning out a couple things. One, I think it's poignant to touch on an inspiration that came from the Necronomicon and Lovecraft's work, and that would be John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, part of the Apocalypse trilogy, where a writer, Sutter Kane, wrote 6 different books.
Stephen King wishes he was Sutter Kane.
He wrote The Breathing Tunnel, The Feeding, The Whisperer of the Dark, The Thing in the Basement, Haunter Out of Time, and The Hobbs and Horror, which is the final bit.
Just want to see a badass John Carpenter film. Watch In the Mouth of Madness. Totally underrated.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I watched it again the other night, actually.
It's so creepy. And the poetic nature of the film, it seeps into your pores as you're watching it. And you can kind of see so much more. You could just watch it on loop and really absorb it.
I feel like, unlike most adaptations of, or at least, inspirations from Lovecraft stories, that movie really nails the Lovecraftian concept of being driven mad and how quickly the world falls apart, the doom and the looming terror. Even though it's still kind of on a relatively small scale compared to Lovecraft, it still exudes that fear, that world-ending, chaotic, where the world's logic doesn't make any sense and everyone's insane thing. I think it really nails that.
Yeah, there's a nice cosmic horror element to it where you truly feel insignificant as everything spirals into insanity.
But they never deal with space, ever once.
No, well, they do like an inner space where the pages transcend space and time, and you have the creatures that come through, especially like on the bridge sequence,
Yeah. Oh, that's a great one. Yeah, is that where she climbs out of the passenger side of the car and then flips over on all fours and her head's upside down? That whole thing?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, the whole thing's great, really.
It's the ultimate love letter to Lovecraft. It's the ultimate Lovecraft to Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And
I think that's another reason why Evil Dead's Necronomicon took off so much, is because there are so few examples of truly great Lovecraft expressed in cinema.
That's true.
And it's all these things that take the ideas of Lovecraft and do their own thing, slightly.
Well, like Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy.
Yeah. Stuff that references the ideas of Lovecraft, but doesn't do his stories because they just haven't worked on screen. And almost, I mean, they kind of slightly work, but none of them are great. At least not as great as the stories think they could be.
Oh, not at all. Well, I think a lot of the reasons for that are that his are on such a mind-melting scale, it's really hard to fathom or even conceptualize that, especially in a movie. Where you're limited by budget and time restraints and scale and all sorts of things. And then also, they're so bleak, there's no real arc. They all just kind of end in either the realization of impending doom or impending doom. And that's kind of all of it.
Yeah, there's no hero's journey in a Lovecraft.
Oh, no, story. Not at all. No. In fact, it's mostly folly.
Yeah. Or you're coming to it after the fact, or a lot of times it's like someone reading a journal of someone who's gone crazy, discovering things.
Which is where you get Evil Dead.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Also, the mind-bogglingly obvious racism of the whole thing is kind of a problem. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's...
For those of you who don't know, every time he talks about this overwhelming doom, he's talking about immigrants.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he was a product of his time, and it's tough to separate.
Even then, he was considered a racist,
He was. I think...
He was a unrepentant racist, and mostly just hated immigrants. So, like, all of this looming anti-God threat, basically just immigration commentary. And man, does he just overblow that. You know, if you were just like a normal asshole, you'd say like, oh, they're coming to take my job. No, he's like, all of existence is going to end because some guy from Morocco is trying to apply for citizenship in America. I don't know if that's really the case.
Is he like the best example of a good artistic expression coming from horrible worldviews?
Probably. He's probably the most extreme. Well, I mean, it depends on if you're talking about horrible worldviews or just being a bad person. Because if it's just being a bad person, then you got to put up Jefferson, Franklin, Frank Miller, you know.
The director that you just mentioned not too long ago.
Roman Polanski.
Roman Polanski.
Terrible person. Klaus Kinski, Roseanne Barr.
Really, this could just be a podcast where we list awful people in the arts over time.
Yeah, a lot of them were bad people. In fact, I mean, like, even Andy Warhol was not a saint in any way, shape, or form. But
let's also be honest. If there's somebody you know and they did something, quote, great, probably not a great person.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that. Jackson Pollock was unrepentantly a violent alcoholic, and yeah, I don't know. There aren't a lot of them, but yeah, he's probably the ultimate example of...
I just think his artistic expression was derived from this irrational fear that I'd like to think we so easily denigrate and don't even give credence to at this point, but unfortunately that's not the case with so many people.
It's kind of complicated, too, because his work is so mind-bendingly epic in a way that modern media can't possibly touch, that people want to make more interpretations, want to convey the cosmic wonder and terror that Lovecraft portrays. But they don't think about the fact that that's all just about brown people or whatever. That's kind of a problem, because it is great work, but even more directly about being fucking racist than most artists are. Mm-hmm. He would be canceled today in a heartbeat, and for good reason.
Yeah, and I totally understand there's a lot of people who won't even sniff his stuff because of what he was about, and I get that.
Mm-hmm. I get it too, yeah. We're not talking about secondhand or like vague allusion. I mean, he straight up was like, I hate immigrants, and this is why they're going to kill us all.
Yeah.
That's kind of a problem.
He named his cat.
Is that it? He just names his cat?
Well, I can't say what he named his cat.
Oh, okay. Okay. Just look up the name of his cat. That should say a lot. That's not good. Yeah, he probably is the ultimate example of that. I mean, I can't think of anybody else who really even comes close, honestly.
Especially not with such long-reaching arc of history kind of thing.
Al Jolson, maybe? I don't know. The jazz singer?
I mean,
kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got more cultural impact than Al Jolson did, but... Oh, you know what? No. Birth of a Nation.
I was just thinking of Birth of a Nation.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the most amazing achievements in the history of cinema, and so fucking awful. It's like praising Nazi propaganda films, you know? Which there probably are some good ones.
Yeah, that's another...
There's a really good one, which I think is way less mean-spirited and racist, but there's a really great movie that was only released in the Soviet Union for a very long time called...
Soy Cuba. Я Cuba.
Which is this long epic about the Castro uprising and killing Batista and all that. It's a fantastically shot film, amazing cinematography, really really, really masterful piece of cinema that is 1 billion% just socialist propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
Or what they call socialism or communism, which isn't really that at all. But great movie. Yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of examples, but Birth of a Nation is probably the only comparable thing. So one of my favorite books of mystery in the world is the tome The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which was so named by a man named Edwards Fitzgerald in 1859 from a translation from Persian to English. And it's a series of quatrains attributed to an Arab poet named Omar Khayyam, who lived from 1048 to 1131. He was referred to as the astronomer poet of Persia. See, people forget that the Muslim culture in general, especially during that period, contributed to science way more than most corners of the world.
It's not they forgot. It's that they are not taught that and or are shooed away from that knowledge.
That's right. I mean, they created the alphanumeric system, tons of mathematics systems, astronomy, biology, chemistry,
medicine,
art,
architecture.
Oh, it's amazing. And, you know, in the West, we're basically told that none of that happened.
All of that stuff was co-opted by us. And when I say us, white Western civilization, and that their versions of things were worthless, and that ours is the true guiding light to bring humanity forward, when really they did it all thousands of years ago.
Oh, yeah. It's just like with the Mesoamerican cultures. White Europeans would be more willing to accept the idea that aliens did it than brown people. Like, very seriously.
Oh, 100%.
It's really sad, but that's the way it is. So this was an epic collection of quatrain poems by Omar Khayyam. And I think this was a book that was really only known in literary circles. Famously, it was just kind of an anecdote. A little bit of a mystery because there's debate on whether Omar Khayyam wrote all of them, which of the collections belong to other authors. It's kind of like the modern controversy over Shakespeare's writing, you know? But it became super famous in 1948 because of the Somerton Man mystery, just kicked off on December 1st, 1948, about 6:30 a.m. on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia, South Australia. Pedestrians found the body of a man lying on the beach. If I remember it, he was propped up against a concrete barrier. There were people that claimed they saw him on the beach the night before and that they saw him move around a little bit, but they thought he was basically just a homeless guy who was drunk, and then they didn't think anything of it. The next morning, witnesses realized there was something wrong because he was unmoving and fully dressed and called the police. He was dead, obviously, and the coroner determined the man to be about mid-40s, good shape, broad shoulders, very thin waist, sort of a 40s, like Atlas type strong man. He was dressed in a suit and tie with a matching sweater, didn't have a hat, which doesn't sound weird to us, but if you know anything about history, if you didn't have a hat, you're essentially a delinquent.
I mean, really, in most of history, people have worn hats.
Well, especially European history, yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think of something like that. It'd be like if you went back and no one wore socks, or socks weren't a thing.
Well, that is also true.
I know, but it's crazy to think of, you know? You just then it's hard to comprehend.
These modern socks, so springy. He was clean-shaven. He had no tattoos, no identifying birthmarks, no scars, no ID, and no dental records that anyone could find. In his pockets were simply a used bus ticket and an unused train ticket. They removed the labels from his clothing, except for 3 items. They were labeled Keane, Keane. He had a cigarette behind one ear and a half-smoked cigarette stuck between his collar and cheek. There's a story there. The autopsy revealed almost no information other than they suspected that he might have been poisoned, but that was just supposition. He had an inner pocket in his jacket. Oh, I'm sorry, no. He had an inner pocket that was sewn inside his pant leg, and inside was a small rolled-up piece of paper, neatly cut around the words Taman Shud, Tamanshud. To decipher it took some time, but eventually it was identified to mean finished or done. and it was found on the last page of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. They didn't know what book it came from, and there was an intense search worldwide to figure out what the fuck happened. Now, we don't want to spoil the Somerton Man for anyone because that is a whole other mystery of its own that you can research yourself, or maybe we'll come to at some point. Astonishing Legends does a fantastic job of covering the Somerton Man and its minutiae.
Yeah.
But this is where the book becomes legend. Why is it from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam? Why is it so cryptic? Why does it look like a man was murdered? You know, there's a whole cornucopia of mystery there.
Which is what these books are all about.
Absolutely. Mystery and apocrypha and curses, magic, some pornography.
Opening up your mind to a world of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Or the impending doom of civilization and existence in general. There are many, many of these books that we're going to have to get to. Unfortunately, we're going to have to split this up into multiple episodes, but it'll be worth it because we will get into some of the ones that you want to hear, some you didn't know about, some neither of us knew about, and may just expand your reading list. Now you know what to ask for Christmas from your family.
Mama, Papa,
Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Misa want the Necronomicon.
Why are you Jar Jar Binks all of a sudden?
Misa want the dead to rise. Gungan dead.
Once again, separating artist from the art. Oh, God. All right, well, okay, so that's going to...
It is the Dread Federation.
Oh, that one, too. Yeah, you're right. I hate
they're
those
all
characters.
of them. All of the
real
prequel
racist.
are filled with them.
And that's sad, too, because Brian Blessed plays the king of the... But it's Brian Blessed! I mean, how awesome is that, you know? But
Yeah.
no, it sucks. Super racist, the whole thing. But what's not racist is our podcast, and we appreciate you listening. That is correct. In fact, we are very progressive and positive about race relations.
We both love everyone and hate everyone equally.
Okay, that's one stance to take. Thank you for listening. Jake, would you like to?
I would. If you guys do enjoy this, please like, share, subscribe. If you wouldn't mind rating us 5 Necronomicons on Apple iTunes or your favorite podcatcher of choice, we greatly appreciate it.
I really wish that was an option. You could just be like, it's like the, like thumbs up, thumbs down, Cthulhu would be the 3 buttons. But anyway.
You can follow us at Dispatch Ajax Pod on Twitter or on Instagram. And
well, we suck at social media, but we're there.
Yeah, we post things every once in a while, so check us out. Or you can get back to us there if it's something you'd like to hear about, or you'd like to tell us how awful we are. Any information is good information as far as this goes.
I guess. It seems to be inviting a lot of trolls, but whatever.
Maybe I'm a pain pig, and I just want you to tell me how awful I am.
Maybe I'm amazed. Well, maybe you are. Are you going to self-flagellate?
No comment.
Look at me, I'm St. Augustine! Whipping himself with the cat o' nine tail.
I'm that albino from the Da Vinci Code.
That's exactly right. Jake is completely correct. He is an albino. I don't like any of that. Don't forget to pay your tabs. Don't forget to clean up after yourselves to some sort of reasonable degree. Don't forget to support your local comic shops and retailers. And from Dispatch Ajax, we would like to say, Godspeed, fair wizards.
Ia, Cthulhu, Fatagan.
Ia, oh!
Rufio!
Thundercats, ho!
As H.P. Lovecraft would say, bang-a-rang!
Please, go away.